Happy Wednesday. So, if you've been following me and or know me personally, you know that I do not shy away from hot button topics, and we value education over fear here. So, of course, everyone's talking about it. How can I not address the NAR settlement that is all over headlines, spreading a ton of misinformation out? Um, And that's really terrifying to me because I feel like I spend so much time trying to make sure that you guys have the facts and the correct information. And then here are 20 different headlines that just frankly get it wrong. So we're going to go over what the heck this settlement is even about, why they're suing, and what the implications are moving forward. First of all, I want to ease your minds that 9 times out of 10, the headlines are wrong. The only one I've seen that I think has any standing at all was kind of funny, and it was that real estate is in its Wild West era. And can I get an amen? That is 100% true. I'm be coming at y'all with lassos pretty soon. I don't have that talent, so I won't. But I don't think it's going to cause housing prices to go down. I don't think sellers are going to get a better deal. I definitely don't think buyers are going to get a better deal, but I also don't think it's going to mean buyers are paying that out of pocket necessarily either. So I know all that, again, completely opposite from the media. Let me explain it, track with me, and I'll walk you down this little rabbit hole because it's quite the rabbit hole. So first of all, to understand the lawsuit, you have to understand the real estate industry. And unfortunately, even the attorneys handling this case don't seem to understand the real estate industry. So, how commissions have worked in the past. Number one, there is no standard commission. That is illegal. That is a federal antitrust law violation to get together and all decide what we're going to charge. It doesn't happen. You see the standard 6%, I charge less. Most of the time I charge more because I'm putting in more work and more money. Just throwing that out there. If that's sticker shock and you don't want to work with me, cool, but I would prefer that we have a conversation. So sidebar. There is no standard. There's never been a standard. Now, what does happen is the broker of each firm is legally the one representing every buyer and seller. The agents then work on behalf of the broker. So a broker, i.e. an entire office, can decide a set commission that they are to charge. And that's not standard in the industry. That's that brokerage. Now, the lawsuits come into play a little bit in coercion to set a standard because it's the bigger brokerages, right? So you got Keller Williams, and you have Remax, and you have Berkshire Hathaway. And there's some others peppered in there, but those are the big ones that people are going to know, right? So, of course, when they have their offices in multiple markets and they're doing the same, and all of these brokers are like, oh, well, we're all under this umbrella corporation, so we're going to charge the same amount. I mean, you can, but it shouldn't be something that is talked about. As far as setting that it has to be. Ultimately, that's up to that broker, and there's intricacies in the policies inside each corporation that make it different. One of the things I love about being independent is I don't have to worry about this because no one can come to me and say, oh, you were in coercion for a standard 6%, because guess what? Most of my listing agreements don't say 6%. They don't. And even if they did, cool. I don't have anything to do with those people. They do what they want. So that's part of it. The other thing is that they're stating that it's not clear that seller is paying commission. Now, agents get really upset about this because from their perspective, seller's not paying commission. Never have. And there are a couple of different ways to look at it. And really, it all comes down to technicalities, which is what attorneys love and why they're making a crap ton of money on this. So in a listing agreement, at least all of the states I work in, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, it outlines my fee as a listing agent, point blank. Then lower, it gives an option for me to split my fee with the buyer's agent. So seller's paying me, I'm sharing. That does not mean the seller is paying the buyer's agent at all. And that's why agents are upset about this lawsuit, is because the seller's not paying it. It's black and white in our contract that it's us choosing to give up some to better market that property, to offer an incentive for other agents to bring their clients versus us just running our clients through it. Where the lawsuit can come into play is, in my opinion, shortcuts. So when you go and close a house then on your Alta, which is settlement statement for a finance contract, or a HUD, which is your settlement statement for a cash contract, it does show up as a line item to the seller. It'll go ahead and shortcut, instead of paying me as a listing broker the full commission that is in the listing agreement, and then leaving it up to me to split that on the back end later and pay the other broker directly. They go ahead and do that at closing for us, which is super convenient. But now it's showing as two separate line items to the seller. It's amounting to the same amount they agreed to, but it's just showing that it's split at closing instead of later. And so then technically, based on those line items, seller's paying commission. Then you get into the whole avenue of, well, the seller's not bringing money to the table most cases. They're paying it out of the equity in their home. So many people argue the buyer is actually paying commission, because guess what? They're offering more on the house to account for the fact that the seller's paying commission and make sure that they're still netting the amount of money that they need to net. But again, it comes down to technicality. It is a line item on this disclosure, on the closing statement for the seller. And so again, if you don't understand the intricacies and how the money flows and how it practically operates, you're looking line item to the seller's paying it. Please understand that doesn't necessarily change the net. And so that's where we're getting this notion that housing prices are going to come down. Well, if they do, it's not coming down, it's moving money, because instead of paying the seller more money for the seller to pay that buyer commission, the buyer's just shelling out money. So it's all the same money, it's just now it's out of your pocket instead of financed into your loan. Is that better for most people? Not really. Then you also have to think about, are buyers really going to come out of pocket? Because on surface level, again, headlines, buyers are going to have to pay their own agent. Okay. Again, first of all, in a way, you could argue it was, and it's financed in. Secondly, are they really? Because in a scenario where someone can pay their agent and someone can't, the person who can pay their own agent isn't asking for the seller to cover it, which you can still do, obviously is going to have a leg up because it's more cash. But that's not really any different from when we were in the COVID crazy market and people were offering $30,000 above appraisal. It's still someone bringing cash to the table. So really, nothing has changed. You're just moving around where the money is. Instead of it being cash over appraisal to the purchase price, it's, oh, I'm going to pay my own buyer's agent commission, so you don't have to. Same thing as if you don't have closing costs, you can ask the seller to pay that. You can still ask the seller to pay your buyer's agent commission. It's allowed. So now the only thing, now that we understand kind of, hopefully, why the lawsuit happened in technicalities, you can understand that it may or may not change things, honestly, because it's technicalities. And for me, if you're a seller and you don't want to offer buyer's agent commission, I'm probably not going to take that listing, because it is going to cost me so much money in marketing. Or, if we're not offering it, cool. Well, guess what? Most of the time they're going to come in and try to negotiate that anyway, because a lot of buyers, depending on price point, but a lot of buyers just don't have the cash. They're coming up with their down payment, they're coming up with closing costs, and now you're asking them to pay the agent commission too. So most buyers don't have it. Then I don't work for free. Do you work for free? So the agent's not going to do it for free. So it has to come from somewhere, right? Which is why it's been, again, not standard and not required. It's never been required, but it's been customary for the seller to pay it, because then the buyer pays more for the house and it all comes out in a wash. But please understand, it doesn't necessarily mean the implications they're stating. So when you boil it down, what it really comes down to is not all agents have been good at their job. They're not explaining how listing agreements work. They're not explaining buyer representation agreements. So we're now going to be required to have a buyer representation agreement before we show you any homes, which a lot of people do anyway. I like to treat it as a date, and we get one, sometimes a couple, but I'm not submitting an offer on your behalf without it being very, very clear, the representation. It just wouldn't. That's a huge liability. I don't understand why some brokerages allow that, because legally it really shouldn't be allowed. But we're going to need to get that up front. And it's not just to protect our income. It's because it's being stated that we're not being clear enough with our clients. So we have to go over this immediately and be very, very clear on how it is going to work, and go through every possible scenario, because now there are more. They've made it very complicated. But that's number one. Number two of the change is we cannot put an offering of buyer commission in the MLS, which I think is curious, because a couple months ago they wanted those to be public and not just shown to agents, but now they don't want them there at all. Really weird. So then, you do have to watch it, because there is a chance that listing agents charging what they would normally charge if they were splitting it and not splitting it, and then buyer's agent is still charging. Opens up, I think, a can of worms, so it might be worse. But it just states that you cannot put it out there in the MLS. You can still negotiate for it, and you can still offer it out, or the buyer can pay it. Any of those three options are fine. So what we're going to see is not necessarily home prices coming down. And if they are, again, it's technicality, because the money's just being moved around. We're not necessarily going to see buyers paying their own agent commission, which, again, we could, but there's also ways to work around that. What we are going to be seeing is more negotiation on the front end, longer to get things under contract, and the necessity for more explanations by agents, because now it's more confusing than it's ever been. Which, again, don't let that scare you. We'll walk through it. But all that to say, super scary headlines. Really, none of it is true. All it means is there's going to be more negotiation and less is decided on the front end. That's pretty much it. Positives, I think, are that agent relationships are going to matter more, because if I know, let's just say I know like 70% of the agents in the market, which I think is probably pretty fair, at least of the ones that produce anything, at least 70%. I'd probably say of the ones that produce, I know more than that, but 70%. Then say you have a brand new agent who knows 3%. And we agree, you don't have to, but we agree that to market your home, it makes sense to pay a buyer's agent, because then they don't have to find buyers who can come up with the cash. They can offer it to the whole buyer pool, right? Makes sense. Well, I'm not allowed to put that in MLS. So now we're relying on my relationships to call these 70% of agents that I know, and then to go meet the 30% I don't know yet and say, hey, I have this really cute house on 123 Main Street. Just so you know, I know we can't put it in the MLS anymore, but we are offering an X% agent commission on it. So if your buyer doesn't have it in cash, don't let them think it's keeping them from this cute house. Come check it out. Click. So this is where it might hurt new agents if they are not in a good backing, because they don't have the connections to do that. Now, I can also pick up the phone and call the agents I don't know, but until it is in an offer, there's nothing written stating that they're for sure going to get it. So trust is more important than ever. Relationships are more important than ever. Working with someone who is actually going to take the time to explain documents to you, to meet other agents outside of their firm, and build those relationships and really, really bring people to your listing is so important. I have a number of listings I've been going really hard at this with. I have a land listing under contract, went under contract in 6 days, which is unheard of for land. And before it was even listed, I had people lined up to go look at it. You know, I couldn't let them into it, but I could say, hey, I have this coming up. Do you know anyone interested? We had 3 showings on day 1 before, like, the second it hit the MLS, because they knew it was coming. They were looking for it, and they went out and they showed it. So agent relationships already matter, but it's going to matter more because it's going to affect not only how we get paid, but how that's structured for our buyers and sellers, and making sure that the most amount of eyes are getting on there while we're also getting our client the best deal, either bringing in the most money if you have the seller or making it the cheapest if you have the buyer. So please, please, please don't go down these little rabbit holes and spread misinformation and say agents make too much, they're going to work for free now. Fun fact, I spend a minimum of $1,000 on every single listing. Doesn't matter if it is like a little rundown shack, $1,000 minimum. Sometimes I make $2,000 on a transaction. So think about that. Months worth of work. And yeah, so we're not out here getting rich. I don't want you to think that. Please talk to my financial advisor. He'll tell you we're not. But don't read everything into the media. Talk to someone who knows. Please make sure that your agent knows, because there are a lot of people who've never navigated this and are not used to the language being used and are still learning themselves. And that's okay. But then they need to be in an office with someone who does. So not against new agents at all. And it doesn't mean that the agent that's been doing it for 30 years is necessarily the best either. It really just depends on the person. But please, 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 please don't listen to headlines. Call me. I'll talk about the forms. I'll talk about what happened. I'm happy to go over what these agents did do wrong that opened this door up and how it's all working, and how we can keep you protected. Because at the end of the day, my job is for my clients. It is. I am making sure that I'm not liable, but more than anything, I'm protecting them. But again, we all got to eat. So houses aren't going to be $2. Commission is not going to be $0. It's just a new way of navigating it. And there's going to be a lot of relational equity coming into play. And honestly, as someone who really, really stands firm on that anyway, I'm here for it. I'm good. But it is very confusing, and we're going to need to take a lot more time in buyers consultations and listing presentations to make sure that you guys understand what's going on now, because it's not so black and white as this is what I do. I'm sure that's clear as mud, but as always, if you guys have questions, concerns, comments, go ahead, leave them in the comments. Call, text, message me directly, and we'll get everything worked out.